Hello, I'm Jeff Paur, senior writer for RealTime Fantasy Sports. Welcome to the RealTime Fantasy Sports Show. It is time for starts, sits, and sleepers for week 7 of the fantasy football season. Always exciting show. I'm going to have Logan Glaser on this week to help me go through all these starts, sits, and sleepers. Should be an exciting show. Logan, thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jeff. I'm excited. We're about halfway through the regular season, and this is where teams start separating themselves and make that push for the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely. Where's the time gone? I can't believe it's already week 7. Craziness.
Yeah, it's gone by very quickly.
And this week we have something exciting we're doing here at Real Time Fantasy Sports. We wanted to mention our Super Shootout contest. It's going on this week. It sells out every time we put this up. So it's 3 games. You pick a lineup from those 3 games, and the top scorer wins it all. Do you want to mention the games, Logan?
Yeah, so we got Detroit versus Dallas. Then we've got Miami versus Pittsburgh and KC versus San Francisco. So lots of stars in between those three matchups and those 6 teams. So a lot of different options to choose from. Whoever scores the highest will take home that first place prize, and
It's just $10 to get in, correct? Is that what?
$10 to get in, and you can
10 bucks?
have up to 10 entries. So
Awesome. Yeah, it sells out every time we put this up. So do it sooner than later. It's about halfway sold out at this point.
correct. Yeah, we just opened it yesterday, and it's a little over halfway full. So it should probably sell out. And my guess is Saturday morning. So go ahead and make sure to look into that. It should be on your league homepage. Just click on that play button, and it'll take you to the link to the Super Shootout.
Yeah, maybe you want to use some of these players we mentioned in this video today. So let's get into this. Our start, sits, and sleepers, Logan. So week 7, it's a tough bye week for bye weeks. I mean, we have Buffalo, the Rams, the Vikings, and Eagles are off. So those are 4 really, really good fantasy offenses, I should say, with a lot of good fantasy players that are off this week. So it's going to be a little bit tough, I think, for teams.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I feel like last week it was mainly like running backs that you're kind of scarce on with the teams that were off. And this week it's kind of wide receivers with AJ Brown, Justin Jefferson, Diggs. Lots of top wide receivers are going to be out this week. So that's going to
Cooper
be
Cup, too. Can't forget him.
Cooper Cup. Yeah, I can't forget
All
about
the
him.
elite guys, yeah. All right, let's get into this. Let's do our starts at the QB position first. Who do you like at QB for this week?
Yeah, so I'm going to be starting Geno Smith. He's currently ranked 8th overall for quarterback so far. He's had 2 games with 48 plus yards rushing, so he can run the ball very well. He's averaging over 21.5 fantasy points per matchup, and he's actually coming into this game probably ranked. He's projected 5th for quarterbacks, which is very surprising with his projections for this week. He's got the weapons in DK Metcalf, Lockett. Lockett's questionable, but it's sounding like he should play this week. And then you also have the emergence of Kenneth Walker in the backfield, and the Seattle offense is starting to click. And this is one that everyone was fading from the start, including me. But Geno Smith has definitely surprised us. I know you're a big fan of Geno.
Yeah, definitely seems to make a lot of these lists for us every week. I like him this week as well. My QB is Joe Burrow. Not a big surprise. I'm going with him here, but I love the way he's playing right now. I think the offensive line's finally starting to come together a little bit. A lot of new people on that line. Takes some time to gel, but he's 3rd overall in fantasy QB score in his last 3 games. First 300-yard passing game since week 1 last week. He has multiple touchdowns, 4 straight games. In 2 of those games, he has 3 scores. So he's really producing at a good clip. Great matchup this week against the Falcons. 31st against the pass, 8th most fantasy points to QB. So I'm looking for Burrow to have a huge, huge game in this matchup. I absolutely love him in week 7. All right, Logan. How about a sit? Who do you not like this week at
Yeah,
QB?
sitting, I'm going to be going with Derek Carr. So he's playing Houston this week, and you would think Houston would have a great defense, but they're currently ranked 8th in pass defense. Where they struggle is giving up on the run, and Waller's questionable. And what Las Vegas has really done in the last couple of weeks is run the ball very well. Josh Jacobs has been one of the top fantasy running backs, including with the NFL, and Houston struggles against that run. So I expect them to continue going with Josh Jacobs this week. So I'm going to be sitting Derek Carr as my quarterback.
Yeah, I love Jacobs this week. I think he's going to have a huge, huge game. My sit is Marcus Mariota. So he's actually coming off his best game of the season, 25.5 fantasy points. It was just his second game with 20-plus fantasy points. So he's shown flashes of good things, mainly because of his ability to run the ball. But my concern is throwing. He has fewer than 150 passing yards 3 straight games. So that doesn't help his fantasy ceiling at all. And I don't like him this week against this team I just mentioned, Cincinnati. They've played pretty well defensively. They allow the 5th fewest fantasy points to QBs. 13th against the pass. So I think Mariota's kind of an iffy play this week. He might get some rushing yards. I don't like him throwing the ball. I don't like him scoring many touchdowns as well. So I think it's a guy I might avoid if you have better options in week 7. Okay, Logan, how about a sleeper QB?
Yeah, sleeper, I'm going with Jacoby Brissett. I think this is going to be a very high scoring game between Cleveland and Baltimore. Baltimore ranks 27th in pass defense. They've also been part of some very high scoring games so far. Jacoby Brissett has thrown for 220 plus yards in 5 straight games. Where he struggles is getting passing touchdowns and turnovers, but because Chubb has really taken over that backfield inside of the 5 and 10 yard lines. But I really think this is going to be a very high scoring game, as I mentioned. So I expect him to find the end zone and continue that yardage. That's my
I
sleeper.
like Davis. I like Davis Mills as a sleeper this week. He has not been great this year. I've actually expected better things from him. Kind of off to a slow start, but he has 2 multiple touchdown games, 245 plus passing yards, 2 of 3 games. He's had some tough matchups, and he's still more than capable of producing big games, in my opinion. And I think he's set up for a good one this week against Las Vegas. We've talked about them as well, but they've really struggled against the pass this year. They actually allow the most fantasy points to quarterbacks. 11 passing touchdowns this year as well they have allowed. So I think Davis Mills gets it going coming off a bye week. I always like that as well when offenses get to prepare an extra week for a defense. So I think Davis Mills is going to have a big week in week 7, probably his best of the season, in my opinion. Let's move on to that running back spot now, Logan. Who's your start at running back for week 7?
Yeah, I'm going with Brees Hall, who should be in everyone's lineups now after his last 3 weeks. He's a top 10 running back so far in the year. Really, the rookie running backs have absolutely emerged so far. You got Brees Hall, Kenneth Walker, and Damian Pierce have absolutely skyrocketed in the last couple of weeks. We talked about how good the rookie wide receiver class is, but this running back class is really starting to take over now. And Brees Hall's slowly, or he probably has overtaken Michael Carter as the running back 1 and for the Jets, who it started out with Carter the first couple of weeks, but now that's Hall's backfield now.
Yeah, I love Hall this week as well. He's a top 10 fantasy back right now, and you got to keep rolling with him. And another guy I like is Ezekiel Elliott. He had his best game of the season last week, ran 13 times for 81 yards and a touchdown. He has 70 plus rushing yards each of his last 2 games. And while he hasn't really been great all year, he has double digit carries every game. So he gets the work, and he has some good, really great matchup this weekend. Detroit, they're just a mess defensively. They allow the 2nd most fantasy points to running backs. I think with Dak Prescott in his first game back from a thumb injury as well, maybe they run the ball a little more, lean on Zeke and even Tony Pollard in this matchup. A really good matchup against a bad Lions defense. So I'm looking for Zeke to have a really big game, maybe his first 100-yard rushing game of the season. Let's look at the opposite end of things now, Logan, a guy we're thinking about sitting in week 7 at running
Yeah,
back.
for running back, I'm going to be sitting David Montgomery. So the report is that the Bears are going to ride the hot hand for the running back for the rest of the season. And I personally think Khalil Herbert might be a better running back than Montgomery. So Herbert's averaging 5.4 yards per carry, and he's looked great so far. He's looked good in his spot starts that he's had when Montgomery's been out and got injured. So I think it can go back and forth now. It's going to be more of a split backfield rather than Montgomery being the number 1 in Chicago. So I'm going to be sitting Montgomery this week.
Yeah, so my decision was, do I pick David Montgomery? He was my other choice for the sit, or this guy, and I picked this guy. It's Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I don't like him. He's been plummeting in the rankings. He's 15th overall in fantasy scoring now, but he's been falling quickly. He's failed to score a touchdown 2 straight games, has fewer than 7 fantasy points each of those games. His touchdowns numbers are what really padded his stats early in the year. He still has double-digit carries just 1 time all season, so he doesn't get a ton of work. Jerick McKinnon actually leads that backfield in playing time and snap count. So he's on the field more than Edwards-Helaire, and I don't like that at all this week against San Francisco. 3rd fewest fantasy points of running backs. They've allowed fewer than 65 rushing yards 3 of 5 games as well. So I think Edwards-Helaire is the guy I'm sitting if I have better options on my bench. All right, how about a sleeper now? Moving on to maybe somebody a little more obscure that we're not thinking about at the
Yeah,
right.
this is a pretty deep sleeper, but it's Rashid White for Tampa Bay. He's had 3+ receptions in 3 straight games, so I really like him out of the backfield with Tom Brady targeting him. He is limited by Fournette, with just Fournette being the absolute star in Tampa Bay. But if Fournette ever goes down, Rashid White is going to have a huge role with that offense. So I'm going to be stashing him on my teams, and I like him as a sleeper play for this week.
All right, my sleeper is Kenyon Drake. Would have been good to call this last week when he had his first 100-yard rushing game of the season, but I still like him this week It's coming off a huge game. I know we got a lot of work early in the year, kind of got the chance to be the lead back. It didn't do much with it, but I like his matchup this week. J.K. Dobbins is really banged up as well. He might not play because of a sore knee. It kind of stiffened up on him in that game last week, apparently, a surgically repaired knee that he had that ACL surgery on. So he might not play. That means Drake might get the chance to run as the number one back against Cleveland. They allow the third most fantasy points of running backs. And you talked about it earlier about this game being maybe a shootout, a lot of points to be had. So you want a lot of offensive players involved if that's the case. And I really like Drake this week as maybe a flex play for your fantasy teams. All right, let's move on to that receiver spot now. Who do you like as a start at receiver?
Yeah, I'm going to be starting Alan Lazard. So his last 4 games have been 14, 17, 13.5, and 17.5, which is a very consistent numbers that he's put up. He's got 4 touchdowns on the season. He slots in really well in your lineups if you're looking for wide receiver 2/3. He's kind of emerges as the number one option with Green Bay, him and Dobes. So I really like Lazard this week, and I'm going to be starting him in my leagues in that wide receiver 2 or 3 spot in my lineup.
So I'm picking another player from that Ravens Browns game. I love Amari Cooper this week. I think he's moved into must start territory, in my opinion. Double digit targets all but 2 games. I mean, he is racking up the work. He has 3 games of 20 plus fantasy points, touchdowns 4 of his last 5 games. So he's racking up targets, getting looks in the red zone, getting a lot of receptions. And Baltimore is not good against the pass. They allow the fourth most fantasy points to receivers, 28th overall against the pass. Again, we talked about this game being a shootout. You want a lot of players involved. I think Cooper produces big numbers to the Browns in week 7. All right, how about a sit now at receiver? Who do you not like?
Yeah, I'm going to be sitting Cortland Sutton as my wide receiver. So last week he only had 14 yards on 2 receptions. Sutton's great. He's got great talent, but it's the Denver offense that is very scary to me right now with Russell Wilson kind of struggling, the offensive line struggling. Running back is a little confusing as they don't know exactly who's emerging there. Apparently Melvin Gordon's going to be starting for them this week, but after we saw what happened last game with him sitting that entire fourth quarter. So I'm staying as far away as I can from Denver offense, and that starts with Sutton. So
Probably a good idea. It's a mess right now. My sit is Christian Kirk. This is a guy that had a great start to the year, 6 receptions each of his first 3 games, but his last 3 games, he has just 7 catches, and he has fewer than 25 yards each of his last 2 games. I think he's going to be fine going forward, especially as they get better matchups. But I'm worried about him this week against the Broncos. He's going to get Cortland Patrick Surtain in coverage, I should say. Cornerback Patrick Surtain is likely going to be matched up against Kirk. He gets the number one receiver most weeks, and he's been fantastic in shutting down the opposition's number one receiver. Denver, fifth against the pass, third fewest 40 fantasy points to receivers as well. So Kirk's a scary play for me this week in week 7. All right, how about a sleeper now, Logan? Who do you like?
yeah, I'm going to be sitting, or my sleeper is Alec Pierce. So Alec Pierce scored his first NFL touchdown last week, which was very good news for him. So he's been a very consistent wide receiver as well, kind of like Lazard. His last 4 games, he's got 9, 12, 16, 14. That slots in really well in your lineup if you're looking for to replace a wide receiver such as Cooper Kupp, Diggs, A.J. Brown, from the bye this week. So he can slide in very well in your lineup if you currently have him on your bench, which most likely he's rostered in your leagues.
And it looks like maybe the Colts might be moving to a little bit more of a pass heavy system. That's what they did last week, kind of surprised people, threw the ball all over the place. I know Taylor was out, but
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what they do with Taylor coming back this week.
yeah,
He's most likely playing. With him missing last week, they definitely turned to that pass offense, but it worked well for them. They put up 30 plus points. So we'll see what they do
definitely.
this week.
My sleeper is a guy playing in the Thursday night game tonight. This is when we're taping this, and it's Rondell Moore. Marquise Brown's out. I know DeAndre Hopkins is going to be active for the first time this season, but Robbie Anderson was just acquired in a trade. So I think Moore's got the shot for the best game out of the receivers this week, in my opinion. He's really played well lately. He has double-digit targets. He had double-digit targets last week for the first time all season. He has 13 catches his last 2 games. I think he's going to lead the way at receiver for the Cardinals in their matchup on Thursday, and I really like him to produce well in this matchup against the Saints. All right, let's move on to tight end now, Logan. The position that's kind of been a tough one outside of Andrews and Kelsey this year, but who's your start? Who do you like this weekend?
Yeah, I'm going to be starting David Njoku. Njoku. So it's another one in that Cleveland Baltimore game, just because I love how high scoring I think it's going to be. But Njoku's currently ranked 6th for tight end. He's playing Baltimore, as mentioned. Kind of goes with my play with Jacoby Brissett as well. But Njoku has looked really solid at tight end. He's been a very consistent option. He's found the end zone a couple of times, and he's getting lots of receptions and looks from Brissett. So I really like him as my start this week.
Yeah, Njoku's finally coming into his own. I like him a lot as well. My guy's a guy normally you would start without hesitation before the season started, but a lot of people have concerns. But I like him this week. It's Kyle Pitts. Scored a touchdown last week in his first game back from injury. I think he'll get a bigger workload. He plays a Bengals team that allows the 13th most fantasy points at tight ends. And I actually think Atlanta's going to get down big in this game. So you're going to have to throw the ball to get back into it. And I think that bodes well for Pitts to get some targets. I really like him a lot this week. Maybe he finally has that huge game that all those fantasy owners have been hoping for with Pitts this year. So I think it might come in week 7. All right, opposite end of things now. Who's a sit at tight end? Who do you not like?
Yeah, for tight end, I'm going to be saying Gerald Everett. I've had him on here a couple of times, but his last 2 weeks, he's only combined for 31 yards. He's still being played in a lot of leagues on RT Sports. He's had 2 yards and then I believe 29 yards the other week. That just won't get it done. And especially with Keenan Allen coming back, I think that offense is going to be much more spread out instead of just targeting him with Keenan Allen out. So I expect Allen to get more of those looks and Everett to fall even further back. So I'm going to be
Yeah, Donald Parham's kind of cut into his playing time a little bit too. He's banged up. It's a possible concussion right now, so he might not play. But if he's starting to really come on, I think he could maybe overtake Everett at some point.
For sure, yeah. Everett's definitely aging up there, and then you got the young.
Yeah. All right, my sit is Robert Tonyan with the Green Bay Packers. He actually had his best game of the year last week. 10 catches for 90 yards, got a ton of work. He has double-digit fantasy points 2 of 3 games, but he's disappeared other weeks. He's had 3 games this year with fewer than 7 fantasy points. He's really been erratic. I don't think he's a plug-and-play option even after last week. And he plays Washington this week. The Commanders allow the 3rd fewest fantasy points at tight ends. So I think Tonyan gets back to his erratic ways and has a poor showing in this matchup. I don't like him a whole lot in week 7. All right, sleeper. Let's look at the sleepers at tight end. Who do you like as a sleeper?
Yeah, I'm going with Mike Gesicki as my sleeper for tight end with the Dolphins. So he's kind of a boomer bust play. He's had several games where he's had under 5 points, but he's also had several that he's had over 15. Last week he had 24.9 points. As we say, he's a boomer bust play. So if you like taking a risk at that tight end spot, go with Mike Gesicki. So he had 2 touchdowns last week, 60 plus yards. His other week, I believe it was week 3, that he also had a very solid week. But then he also has those duds that he only gets 1 reception. So it's definitely who's going to be targeting him. It's looking like Tua is going to be back for the Dolphins. It's not confirmed yet, but it's looking like he's trending towards playing. So if he's back, I really like Gesicki this week and hopefully gets a boom week.
My sleeper is Juwan Johnson, another player in this Thursday night game. He had a season high in receptions last week, caught 4 passes for 41 yards on 6 targets. Not a ton of work, but solid. He's getting the most playing time at tight end for the Saints, though. They're still missing Michael Thomas, and Jarvis Landry. So someone has to catch passes in that offense outside of Olave and Alvin Kamara. And I think it could be Johnson. He's starting to emerge, and it's a great matchup this week against Arizona. They really struggle to stop the tight end. They've been awful. Allow the 2nd most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. So I think Johnson could be a good sleeper play for a lot of fantasy teams this week. All right, Logan, that is our starts, sits, and sleepers for week 7 of the fantasy football season. Thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jeff. Should be a good week.
Good luck to everybody in week 7. This has been Jeff Paur for RealTime Fantasy Sports.
And this has been Logan Glaser from RealTime Fantasy Sports.
Have a great day, everyone.